Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. I wanted to take a quick moment to say that this is officially episode number 100. I can't believe we're here already. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has continued to listen. Whether you found this podcast from the beginning or have only recently joined in, I hope it has helped you know that you are never alone in this lost journey. If you ever have any feedback about the show, you can always email me at sarah@journeyforjasmine.com or reach out to me on any of my social media accounts at Journey for Jasmine. So today's business spotlight is from Danielle. Here is what she had to say. Hi, I'm Danielle, the author of A Lost Mom's Journal and creator of Love and Loss OG, where I create baby loss remembrance pieces. My book and little business is in honor of my daughter. She is my first baby and passed away at 5 weeks, 2 days old, from severe brain damage caused by a concealed placental abruption during labor. The pregnancy was smooth and healthy, but unfortunately, we had the worst luck during delivery, and it all went wrong. She fought so hard in the NICU, but the damage was too severe. I honor her every day by sharing her story and advocating for lost mamas all over the world, honoring all types of loss. We will remember the footprints that never touched the floor, and with time, I'm learning that grief can be both my enemy and my friend. I'm privileged to be able to use my creative flame to handcraft special baby loss remembrance pieces with a range of materials and hope each piece brings a little comfort to the lost mama receiving it. Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing about your business. Today, I am talking with Rob, who is one of the co-founders of the Sad Dads Club. In this episode, he discusses the stillbirth of his daughter, Lyla, along with how it led him to come together with other lost fathers. He also discusses the reasons he feels fathers do not get as much support after going through loss. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Rob from the Sad Dads Club. Hello, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for having me on here, Sarah. My name is Rob Ryder. I live in Falmouth, Maine with my living son, Dallas, who will be 5 next month, and my wife. And I am one of 3 co-founders of the Sad Dads Club. All 3 of us had stillborn daughters within the span of 18 months of one another. And my forever firstborn, Lyla, my daughter, was stillborn on December 13th, 2017.
So, how did you meet each other?
This is a very interesting story, and I'll try and make it as coherent and easy to follow as possible. But Jay, who is Bella's dad, he and I are best friends all the way back to college. College is where we met one another during our first year. We were in neighboring dorm rooms and we lived together subsequent years throughout our time at Bowdoin College. And he and I both lived in Portland, Maine. We had graduated at various points of our story, we had both lived in different places after graduating, but we ended up back in Maine and we were both living in the big city of Portland, Maine. And he and his wife were pregnant with their second child. And that second child, Bella, very tragically and unfortunately was stillborn in January of 2017. I was there as his best friend, and I saw how incredibly heartbreaking it was for his family to go through that loss. I had never known a friend or a family member. I'd never even heard of a stillbirth or a stillborn. That outcome was something that I was completely unfamiliar with. So I was there for him as best I could be, knowing that I had never experienced something like this or seen anybody else that I had known go through this, but I saw how unbelievably just heartbreaking it was. And my wife and I struggled to get pregnant, but miraculously found out that we were expecting our first, a daughter, in December of 2017. And that exact same year, at 38 weeks, we went in for what was a normally scheduled doctor's appointment, and there was no heartbeat. It was a otherwise textbook pregnancy leading up until it just wasn't. It was in that moment that everything changed. And so again, Jay, he and his wife lost their daughter Bella in January of 2017, and then my wife and I lost Lyla in December of 2017. So within that calendar year, we both, and interestingly, our wives saw the same doctor. Like it was just crazy. And the doctor even said that, given what she does, she obviously has been through this before, but she never had seen two in a year. And the fact that we were best friends was just downright spooky for her. So in that way, Jay and I immediately had one another that we could lean on and that we could validate through our experiences as fathers who had lost children or who had children who were stillborn, specifically daughters. And then 7 months later, through a mutual friend, we heard that a classmate of ours, Sarah, maiden name Delia, was 2 years behind Jay and me at Bowdoin College. Bowdoin is a very small liberal arts school in Maine. And so the community and the alumni network is very tight knit. So we had heard from a mutual friend that Sarah and her husband recently had a stillborn daughter, also their firstborn, Isabel. And we'd never met Chris before. We didn't go to school with him. We knew Sarah and we knew Sarah's sister, but just again, because we were all living in Portland, Maine, and we had mutual friends, they reached out and said, "Hey, would you be willing, Rob and Jay, would you be willing to talk to Chris?" And we said, "Of course." And that became an instant bond between the three of us. We had all had stillborn daughters again within 18 months of one another. And we were getting so much out of being able to go to one another for validation, for support, and to just not have to explain ourselves of why we felt a certain way, or even if we couldn't articulate how we were feeling, there was just no need to explain. It was a bit of like a total relief to be able to just unmask and not have to pretend or paint anything on. And that relief that we felt from having one another as a source of support is something that the more we talked about, the more we realized that there are going to be other dads out there who don't have that support, because we looked high and low and there just wasn't any other community-based resource where dads could gather together and support each other and validate our experiences. So that was the impetus, I guess, of starting Sad Dads Club, was really what we were getting out of being able to connect with one another. And we figured that that probably would expand far beyond where we were in Maine. And with the internet and with Zoom, we were able to potentially reach every dad. Like that isn't actually possible, but it's not impossible. As long as you have internet, we can probably reach you. So that was how we started, just I guess through the community at Bowdoin College, and Jay and I had having known each other and then having friends in common with Chris and Sarah is how Jay, Chris, and I became acquainted with one another.
Yeah, one of those things that's like you don't want to have to bond over something so horrible, but it's like you're glad to have them when you do go through it. You're glad to know somebody else, but it's like, God, if we could have just been like united under any other circumstance, that would have been great.
You immediately reach a level of like depth in your relationship with someone else who has gone through something so terrible, because it's so personal and it's so painful that you have so little explaining and figuring out of one another just from sharing that traumatic life experience, which is interesting. And I can't really articulate this in a way that's going to be easy to understand. I always just use my hands. It's like you meet a stranger, you're here. But if you meet another lost parent, you're here. You're just like at a different, and I know that I just said you have a deeper connection. So technically, I guess my hand should be going down, but it's just you're sort of immediately like positioned to be a close, intimate source of support for one another, because there's so little that you need to explain in any given moment, not even any given day. It's any given moment that you don't have to articulate why you might seem off, and nobody questions it either. There's just a lot. It's just easier, and that's not to say that as lost parents we don't go out in the world and make plenty of other friends who are not lost parents, but it's remarkable how little you have to say or explain to another lost parent, and you become so close with them so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have met so many people in the community, and I feel that way too. You can just say like, I'm just sad today, and it's not like people are like, well, why? Why are you sad? Like that happened a long time ago. Like why? You don't have to go through all those stupid comments.
Oh, the stupid comments, of which there are plenty. And I don't envy the position of coworkers or loved ones of lost parents, because it is a very difficult dynamic to navigate, but it's also not that hard if you take a little extra effort and you're willing to share in a few moments of discomfort, and also understand that those few moments of discomfort for you, the non-lost parent, that's like, think about the lost parent who's living in that or spending a lot of time just like muddling through it. Anyway, this isn't about bashing anyone who
No,
hasn't lost a parent. I
no.
just, I, the whole, just as you said earlier, the like, well, that happened a long time ago. There is no expiration date on grief, and it goes on and on. And if you don't address it, it's just going to compound, which is why having community is so important. Having a resource, having support is so vital, because otherwise it just becomes this thing. It's hard enough to control it as it is, and it becomes uncontrollable if you're not able to address it and you're not able to learn at least how to manage it. And there's no guidebook or there's nothing, there's no one thing you can read. There are many things you can read that will help, but there's no one thing you can read at any point in your lost journey so far that I've found. And I'm only, this will be, geez, math coming up on
You'll be 7 years, right?
7 years. Yeah. Wow. That was so and again, I know I've met other lost parents who are further along in their journey, or further removed from the date of their loss. And it doesn't matter. It still is it's just a significant life event that redefines you.
Yeah, we actually lost Jasmine just a few months after you because we lost her in March of 2018, so she would have been 6 this year. So
Oh
I think
goodness.
it's always interesting to talk to people like you and me who are a little bit further along the journey, because I meet so many people who are like newly after their loss, and again, they just say like, does it ever get better? Does it ever get better? And
Mhm.
I always think it doesn't get better. We just learn how to live with it. So, I mean, has that been the
Totally.
case for you?
Yes, I think Jay, who was almost past, he almost was at the 1 year mark at the time that I lost Lyla. So he was coming up on Bella's 1 year, and I remember him telling me that like it gets better, you will feel better. And I trusted him because I knew that he was living it and that he was further along, and I was looking at him for guidance and for advice. And so I heard him, but I still just in that rawness of how new it was, I didn't see a time where it wasn't so excruciating that it would just kind of be out of my control, this unrelenting pain and this heart-shattering reality of having an empty house. And he had a living child at home, and so we went home to different situations. And I always talk to we talk about this a lot, losing your first versus losing a child when you have a living child at home. I feel like my wife and I had it easy to come home to an empty house, and just we didn't have to put it on for anyone, or we didn't have to like we could stay in bed all day if we wanted to, and that would have been fine because no one was relying on us. Whereas other lost parents who had living children at home at the time of their loss are like, what? That's what got me out of bed. That's what I needed. I couldn't imagine doing it the other way. And so again, it's always interesting to speak to parents. Everybody has, no matter how similar their stories are, unique nuances and complexities that are theirs and theirs alone. But I think it has absolutely gotten better. I think that it has gotten exponentially better since meeting all the dads in Sad Dads Club, because I have so many more dads with whom I'm connected. I have so many more children whom I know who should be here and aren't. And that makes me feel like Lyla has company in the cosmos, or whatever you want to believe. And for me, that brings comfort. And a lot of it really is looking for ways to find comfort. That's what makes it easier for the individual, for me at least. And so I think that that's the magic in Sad Dads Club, is it is really a place to help people through, whether you're on day one, year one, decade one. Just having a space to talk about it is important. Having a space to vent, to get advice, that all lends to making it to it getting better, and you, the individual, the lost parent, feeling better. And I think that I can say without hesitation that yeah, it's gotten better. Grief is still there, and sometimes being so close to it through the work of Sad Dads Club, because I'm the only full-time employee. I'm putting air quotes around that, but I left my previous full-time job in October of last year, and so I've just been focused on Sad Dads Club, which at times can create some pretty visceral moments of grief and it feeling very fresh and new, especially when I hear more and more stories. But ultimately, if I go back into, or I enter a cycle where I feel grief a little more extremely, I come out of it feeling more relieved. I don't know how to explain that. I'm sure somebody with like a mental health professional background could help me through that one. I should ask my therapist next time we have a session. But it does. And I've talked to, I was with another sad dad who's coming up on the 1 year mark after losing his son, Avi, and we were in his wood shop on Friday night. And we're talking about something that Sad Dads Club does, which is called My Child, My Story, which is every other Thursday, a dad will opt in, and this is via Zoom, to share the story of their child and their loss in long form, uninterrupted. Just like they have the floor, dads show up to listen. They can also, the dad presenting can invite whomever they want. If they want to invite their partner, family members, friends, whomever, it's up to them. And we were just talking about how once the power tools were turned off and we were drinking some beers, we were like, why, like, it's such a heavy feeling, and we'll cry with the person and we'll get really emotional and it will feel just heartbreaking. It's so, to hear stories in such detail, it brings you right into it. But then afterwards, even after you cry, after you feel this unbelievable overwhelming sense of heartbreak, you feel better as a participant and as the presenter. Like the presenter, I always try and follow up with them and say, tell me how you felt before, during, and after your story. And they always say that after they feel better, or overwhelmingly, I shouldn't say everybody has said that, but a majority of presenters have. So yeah, even being brought back into moments of extreme and visceral heartache and heartbreak, come out the other end feeling like stronger and better and more relieved. It's unique.
Grief is weird sometimes,
Yes. I could have way shortened that whole explanation, just been like, yes, I do feel better. Grief is weird. And that would have, and everybody who has experienced it would be like, I get it. But I'm a chatty dude, so everyone has to
No, but
suffer
I
through
like your
my.
explanation. I mean, it is true, but I found too that, hearing a lot of stories and stuff that sometimes I have a hard time not like taking on other people's grief. And I'm trying really hard to like not do that. Do you ever struggle with that at all?
I do, but I have a willingness to want to be in it with them. And I think that that is another part of Sad Dads Club that makes it a really special place, is that so many of the dads are eager for that connection. And to have that connection, you have to sit in that grief in the way that we're structured. It's a community that is based on providing support for other lost dads. And so I think we all willingly take it on. And I think that it's important that I'm always articulating and trying to reiterate that, hey, if this feels overwhelming for anybody at any time, our door is always open, which means you can feel free to walk out if this is not something that's good for you, because then you can always walk back in. So I think that we see that in just everybody's journey, and taking on other people's grief is like adding rocks to your own backpack that's already full of grief. And if you've been walking around with it for a while, no rocks come out. I don't like the analogy where rocks are taken out of your backpack and your grief. I think the same number of rocks are always in there. I think you walk around with it for longer so it starts to feel lighter, but maybe you didn't sleep well the night before, so you put that backpack on in the morning full of the same number, the same weight of rocks, and it just feels heavier that day for whatever reason. But yeah, it's emotionally exhausting, but I can't do anything else. And I feel as though this community has so many guys who show up so often for each other, and that really is what makes it so powerful, because if somebody does need to step away, somebody else is stepping up to share that space with another lost dad or a new lost dad to the community. Or and yeah, it's hard, but it's so fulfilling and so rewarding. And it also keeps me feeling very close to Lyla, which for me, that means I'm getting so much out of it. And I'm feeling so validated as her father and her as my daughter.
Yeah, I feel like it's ways like that that we stay connected and still parent them because we still want to parent them, after loss, and this is our way of parenting them.
Exactly. That's so totally it. It doesn't look the way any of us expected. It doesn't look even the same day to day, week to week, moment to moment, but it is, we're finding ways that validates them. And I say validate all the time, because we have evolved into a community that has dads who have had a series of different losses. But Chris, Jay, and I, the three co-founders, were all experienced stillborn daughters. So we can only speak to our experience. So this is when I'm about to launch into about validation is specific to stillborn children. I don't want to presume anybody else's experience if they haven't, if they lost their child another way. But I do think this across the board of losing a child, and the longer time goes on without them, that you see the world, friends and family not asking about them as much or not checking in on you regarding the loss of that child as much. And back to the unique intricacies of a stillborn child, or even one who kind of spent their life too short in the hospital, like they also don't get to know friends and family. Like you the parent are really the one who had the relationship and held them and kissed them and sang to them and had any of that short time with them. And so the validation of being like, oh no, I am their father. I struggle with that through my first Father's Day. And Jay was the one who sent me a text message wishing me a happy Father's Day. And I was like, I'm not a father. And he's like, yes, you are. You're Lila's dad. And that was a light switch moment for me. And everything else subsequent within since Sad Dads Club's launch has like reinforced that. And all of this work reinforces that. And that is like the greatest gift that I personally could get as someone who remembers me having struggled with the concept of, am I her father? She was born, but I didn't bring her home. What does that mean? What is she? It's like, it's very obvious now. I wouldn't even, without a shadow of doubt or moment of hesitation, like she's my daughter and she always will be.
I love that he sent you that text.
Yeah, it
It's
was
like making me
totally, it
tear
changed
up
my
over here.
life. It changed my life. That was like the best text I could have ever gotten.
Now I know like a lot in the lost community, as you kind of brought up earlier, there's not really that many resources specifically for dads. Do you feel like that's because dads don't want to talk about it, or just because the focus isn't on dads, or like why do you think that is?
I think there are a few reasons that I've deliberated and talked to other dads about, and completely justifiably and understandably, the focus is on the birthing parent. The focus is on the mother. The mother has endured the physical stress, the physical experience, along with the emotional, psychological, spiritual, like everything the father has endured, the mother has, plus the physical, which is just so like mountainous in its significance. And so, and there's like literal body healing in terms of like physical. We get into grief and there's healing there too, but there is, there's a lot of focus on the mother, which again, no one in our no one in our Sad Dads Club community does not understand why that is. Like, we are so like, yes, of course, our focus as the father also goes to our partner, to the birthing parent, because one, for dads, I think, and this is me personally, it was a way I could deflect my own grief. I can regain control by focusing on my wife and taking care of her. I already felt like I failed with not being able to protect my daughter. So now I have to regain control and I have to protect my wife. And then I can also deflect my grief and I can worry about that later, because right now, my wife, who just went through, a cesarean and has to like physically heal, and I have to take care of getting her home, that becomes my focus. I think generationally, there's the stereotype that being strong, again, air quotes, as a man means being stoic and not showing emotion. And that then may be taken as they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be vulnerable, or even a step further, they're unwilling to be vulnerable. And the expectation societally, historically, was that men don't, they just suck it up, grin and bear it, and move on. And in Sad Dads Club, we're redefining masculinity and what being strong means, and that there is nothing more profound and more strong than being in touch with your emotions, than being expressive. Or in touch doesn't necessarily even mean talking about it out loud, because we have some dads who come to our sessions and we always say within our online engagement, if you want to come and you want to turn your camera off and just listen, that's fine. However, the space is most beneficial and helpful for you, use it that way. There's no expectation or pressure to share. So I think that, but just by showing up, you're taking that step and you're being vulnerable, and you're also showing up for other people. So you're being generous with your time. And I think just a combination of why there are no resources for dads might just be the expectation societally, and that's people are talking more and more about mental health now, so I think it's less of a surprise. But still shocks me when I take a step back, and we all do in the Sad Dads Club community, because I'm speaking from my experience, but I'm also speaking on behalf of like this community would not be what it is were it not for every dad showing up over and over and over again for each other. Like that's what makes it special. That's what makes it what it is. And we see that there is such a need there because there just isn't anything else, that I think that's why a lot of the dads feel an ownership over making sure that this has a strong foundation and that this community exists, and just to make sure that there is no dad who doesn't think there's nothing out there. Whenever they decide to engage with the community, whenever they feel ready, that's their timeline, that's their path. But just making sure that they know that this is there is something I think we've all rallied around, because prior to this there wasn't. And why that is, I think, I just kind of went through my guesses, though still it was weird that as Chris J and I conceptualized this for years before we launched it, which was when we launched it March 1st, 2022. But yeah, there wasn't anything community based that was available for men to get support from one another and to be vulnerable.
And I like that you did it, focus on just men, because I think a lot of them, like you said, feel more comfortable talking with other dads. Like they don't feel as comfortable talking in a group of like moms, because it's different. It's a different experience, even though you went through the same thing.
Yeah, we struggled with this to be like, how does this look? And yes, it's called Sad Dads Club, but as someone who went to Quaker school, I like am big into inclusion. And so if like a mom did want to show up, is that appropriate? But ultimately, we aren't equipped to support moms because we don't have that experience. And it also just, again, as you said, like it does require its own space. It's a different experience. And when we get into topics, things like intimacy after loss, we just having, dads, non-birthing parents there only is really, it makes it more comfortable, and we're trying our best just to make it be a space that is as effective as it can be for the intended audience, which I think it just works best and makes folks most comfortable when it is a space for dads. And back to just like, yeah, I'm not equipped to, so I couldn't, beyond my wife, who, she and I share, Lyla, I don't think I can necessarily, I'm not equipped to necessarily help a lost mom in the same way, who's a stranger whom I haven't met before, in the same way that I can connect with and help support a lost dad who's come into our group, maybe, within the first few weeks or months removed from their loss.
And I think that makes sense. I mean, we want to, help people that, or I guess we feel like we know how to help people close to what we've been through personally. I mean,
Right.
yeah, we all go through a similar experience in that we've all lost a child, but like not even two miscarriages are alike, or two stillbirths are always
Mhm.
alike. So, we just work with what we can.
It's true. And we are, as we always say, building the ship as we push it in the water. So we're just doing our best to try and kind of find what works best and foster that and protect it as best we can, and to help develop it into something that can really have a wide reach and help other dads who are out there around the world struggling in the wake of their loss.
So I'm curious how you came up with the name.
Okay, so this is back to Lost Moms. My
Okay.
wife thought of it, and it was, if memory serves, and it typically does. I have a remarkably good memory, though. If we got into like my grief story, there's spots I just can't remember at all, which is another one of those grief is weird. We can categorize it under that. But Jay, Chris, and I, so we'd been connected. I had obviously spent lots of time with Jay. He even lived at my parents' house after we graduated from Bowdoin, down in Maryland, just outside DC. He was looking for housing. He had a job. Anyway, that's getting neither here nor there. But, Jay and I have spent years and years together. We've known each other longer than we haven't. And I had spent some time one on one with Chris. But at this point, the three of us hadn't yet hung out in person yet. And we had a plan to, I think if memory serves, we had a plan to hang out this one night. It was like a dark, cold, rainy night in Maine. And I told my wife, was like, hey, I'm going to go to Jay's house and Chris is going to meet us there and we're going to all hang out. She's just kind of looking outside. It was like, oh gosh, like what a, terrible evening to have to travel and to be said you guys are going to be sitting around in the dark like Sad Dad's Club. And it just like kind of planted something in my head and I started saying it and it caught on with Chris and Jay and we all three of us just started saying it. And that was before we even necessarily knew or thought that we would try and start something to bring more dads together. So all credit goes to my wife for that one.
I love it though. I mean, it's it kind of gives you a funny image, but also like
Yeah.
like a not like I don't know how to explain it, but
Someone I this is one of our I can't remember who, but one of our oh, I think it was Maeve's mom. I believe that so John, who's in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, one of our sad dads, who was at our last retreat. Pretty sure it was his wife who commented on a post after we put up after one of our retreats. It was like, when are we gonna get the Glum Mums Club? Which we I can't even say it without it's just so clever. And I was like, what would be like the mom's equivalent to something that rhymes to, be like similar to Sad Dad's Club? So glum mums. And I thought that was very clever. And it's
tell her
still
she needs to start it.
no kidding, right? I mean, the name's there. It's like halfway there.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what the Sad Dads Club does, like what you offer, like things like that?
Yes. So we offer, I guess, start with our mission statement. So Sad Dads Club helps fellow bereaved fathers navigate life after loss by nurturing a supportive community and providing access to mental health services. So mental health services I'll start with is just it's a catch-all right now because what we do is peer-to-peer non-clinical support. We offer nine different virtual engagement sessions, whether via Zoom or our private Discord channel per month. So there are nine of those per month. The one that we really kind of advertise widely, and then we have more nuanced ones off of this, but is our weekly Thursday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We alternate between a Sad Dad's open hour, which is just we pick a topic like careers after loss, going back to work, and then we open up the floor for discussion. And then the alternating Thursday evenings are My Child, My Story, where a father opts in and shares the story of their child in long form. And we usually, with the presenter's permission, we record those. We'll put them in a shared drive because sometimes dads can't make it, and they're like, "Oh, I really wanted to hear, Bella's story, and is there any way we could start recording these?" So we did start recording them with the blessing of the presenter. So we do these virtual engagement opportunities. Again, there are nine right now per month. And we also do regional gatherings. There's things that happen organically all over the country, just where we have sad dads concentrated. There have been get togethers in Southern California. I was at a baseball game this past weekend with sad dad in Portland, Maine. People have gotten together in the Midwest. And then we do twice annual retreats here in Maine. So there is an amazing house right on Panther Pond in Raymond, Maine, which is about 35 minutes northwest-ish from Portland. So very accessible from our airport. And that was something that we started last October. And then we did one this past May, June, and we're doing our next one in October. And that's not something that we don't just put it out there, be like, who wants to come to our retreat? It is something that we, again, when someone comes to one of our Zoom sessions on Thursdays, we provide an invite link to our private Discord channel. And that's where like a lot more it, it's not calling it an added layer of security is sort of the best I can think of, though it's just to kind of keep some control over kind of who comes in and just making sure that people who come in are in there for the right reasons. And it's worked so far. So that is where we sort of gauge interest and availability for our retreats. And there's usually 25 guys who come from all over the US and some parts of Canada. And we have these unbelievably transcendent 2 evenings together in beautiful Maine and just deepen our relationships with one another. So that is all the non-clinical peer-to-peer support. What we're gearing up to do right now is we have a pilot program in place to start providing professional mental health services for fathers. We want to remove the logistical and the financial barrier to accessing quality professional mental health services. So by that, we mean by removing the logistical barrier, we as an organization, Sad Dads Club, we became a nonprofit just over a year ago. We will find therapists who specialize in child loss or perinatal late term pregnancy loss and grief. so that and then we will send dads from our community to those therapists who have been vetted and who we think are best suited to help the audience, the patients that we're sending them, the members from our community. And so the folks from our community who go and receive those professional mental health services will never see a bill because the therapist will bill our organization directly. So we're getting that ready to launch. We've been working on it between Chris J and me for the last better part of a year, maybe even right around a year. And so it's taken a lot of work, but that's going to be what a majority of our fundraising efforts are supporting. So we're going to keep doing what we do, which is community building, providing non-clinical peer-to-peer support. But then we think, what can we do to really fill the scope, like to fulfill the scope of healing, of grieving, of supporting dads and giving them crucial tools to help them cope and navigate grief in a healthy way. And so something that we can't personally offer ourselves, because none of us are mental health professionals, is seamless access to quality professional mental health services. So we're really, really excited to get that going and to grow it.
I think that's amazing, everything that you're doing. I mean,
Thanks.
not only just providing the community, which is amazing, in and of itself, just having other dads to talk to, but then also offering that extra layer of support that, a lot of people need after loss.
Right. For Chris and Jay and me, it was it was vital. It was crucial. Like we were so lucky to have good insurance through solid employers, and so we were able to access quality professional mental health. We were able to access therapists, but even still, we do remember the slog of having to go through the process of like, does this therapist take my insurance? Are they available? Are they taking new patients? Are they specialized in what I need them to be specialized in order to make it worth my time and like be something of value? So that logistical component is like not insignificant. And we really do think that everybody should be able to access it. On the other side of that, with the financial barrier that a lot of people have as to whether or not they can afford it, because it's expensive, and it gets more expensive if you go multiple times a week, which a lot of times people need to do when they're in the depths of their grief, in the immediate aftermath, where the PTSD and the trauma and everything just sinking in, and you're just in a fog, so you can't even bring yourself to utilize your executive functioning to find that right therapist. So we're hoping to like get that piece and then remove the financial piece, because experience in I'm saying experience, like the experience of losing a child, is what dictates need. That's what we think, like nothing else. So anybody who comes to us eventually, when we scale this program and that we get it to the point where we know we can and want to, that we'll be able to send whomever, whenever.
Yeah, and you're right. Like it is a lot of logistics. I went to a counselor after my loss, and it was really hard to find one who specialized in grief, first of all, and in one who had experience with child loss. I mean, that was the hardest thing to find.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I think that people often think of cost, which is certainly a factor and certainly can be a barrier for a lot of people and families. But that logistical element, especially, you just have to consider that this isn't someone waking up like happy go lucky on a Saturday morning with the with the gosh, what do I want to call it? I can't think of what I want to say, the word, it's escaping me. So just or I guess the luxury of just kind of like nonchalantly browsing the internet. No, does this look good? Or this is no, they're like, even like getting out of bed is hard enough. So powering up your computer and then trying to figure out like, who takes new patients? Do they take my insurance? Do they specialize in grief? It's like that will become a factor that keeps people from even beginning. So if we
Yeah.
can remove that also, and we vet these people, obviously when a therapist and a patient get into a room, we can't control what's going to happen there, but we can certainly make sure that we're picking thoughtfully a mental health professional who is best suited based on their experience and specialty to help the people in our community, because we know what they're going there for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that I was just imagining that like when I was in the depths of my grief after loss, and I'm like, yeah, I wasn't about to like get up and like sit at the computer and like spend time
Right.
researching. Like I'm not doing that. I would rather just lay in bed and cry.
Oh yeah, that's the easier option. And it's not as though you're like, well, this sounds better to me. Like I want to lay here and cry. Like,
Right.
no, like it's horrible, but it's all you can do. So if we're able to just bring to somebody, be like, send an email to this person. Here's the email address. Say you were sent by Sad Dads Club. They're going to schedule you. You'll figure it out with their admin or whatever. Voila. That makes it about as easy as we possibly can. And we're trying to be as thoughtful in the process of being, of understanding what we went through and being like, what made it more difficult? What made it almost impossible? What made us almost abandon entirely getting that professional mental health? And there still is a bit of a stigma around it where I hadn't done therapy before I lost Lyla, and I'm sure I should have. It couldn't have hurt, even if everything is air quotes again, if nobody can see me, this is audio only, going right. You can still benefit from somebody to talk to about what you're going through because life is inherently hard. And it's a whole heck of a lot harder if you've experienced child loss or pregnancy loss. And it's confusing and it's isolating. And you need somebody who has professional training, who can equip you with tools that really can help you develop, build, and expand on a foundation that will help you start your healing journey.
Yes, definitely. My mom, she's actually a counselor. So I kind
Oh,
of
very
have
cool.
grown up around counseling. So I've always had like I guess a more positive view of it just because
Mhm.
of her. But yeah, I definitely think a lot of people, like when I mentioned I would go to therapy I've been a couple of different times in my life, like different periods. And, people are just kind of like, why? Like, why are you going? It's like,
Right.
because it's helpful. Like,
It's
it's
like,
a
why
good
aren't you
mindset.
going?
Yeah, exactly. That's the better question.
Yeah, because I've seen you and you need therapy. I I
Okay, no,
told
can't say all the things in our head, right?
I know that's why we have or we try to adopt filters. I I said when I'd started a new job like years ago and I was going to therapy weekly and it was like a non-negotiable thing for me. I was like, hey, this lunch hour, I'm going to be going to therapy. My boss is like, oh, whoa, you don't have to tell me that. I was like, I don't care. I'm not
It's not a secret.
embarrassed by it. It's not a secret. And like, I included in my cover letter that I lost a child. So like you should be like, thumbs up, dude. Like take whatever time you need. If you need an extra 30 minutes to decompress between the time of your session and when you come back to your desk, like totally cool. That's what I will say when Sad Dads expands to the point where we do have just mental health is so important. And it's life is coming at us a million miles per hour at every moment. It's unrelenting. And I think it's particularly dizzying and confusing and sad and heavy and difficult when you're living with loss and grief, just because things that you don't even understand why they're triggering you trigger you. Because if there's something subconscious and you get, instead of going through a yellow light, you slow down, you stop, and then all of a sudden you're just like hit with a wave of grief. You're like, why was that? It wasn't a song on the radio. It wasn't like it was a yellow traffic light that made me stop. I'm pulling the most random example I can think of, and maybe it's not a great one, but it's
No, I
just
think it
to,
is though, because sometimes really the littlest thing can just set you off and you're like, what the heck just happened? Like,
yes, exactly. That's the only point I was trying to make. I shouldn't have even brought up traffic signals.
no, but it's true. I mean, it could be anything. You could be like, I was pregnant at this traffic light and I remember
Yeah, yeah,
driving to an appointment or, whatever it
true.
could be.
Right. No, you're
So
you're right. The significance of traffic signals is strong.
that's all I'm trying to say. Don't
I
don't
appreciate
discount
it.
it, right?
No, I appreciate it.
So before you started the Sad Dads Club and, after your loss, were there any, even if they weren't specifically dad-centered ones, but were there any resources that you found helpful?
Yeah, Chris and Jay. Those two, I guess, and that's like the very most, that's the smallest kind of beginning spark of Sad Dads Club, but it really was that peer support. And I had great friends who'd never experienced child loss who were there as much as they could be, and my family was there as much as they could be, but it just wasn't the same. And for me, not having to explain myself and being able to just sit in a space where other people understood and got it. And I could just also listen, which anybody listening to this might be like, this guy actually stops talking for long enough to listen. But I peer-to-peer support was huge for me. That and therapy. I didn't pursue anything else. I actually got off of social media altogether because place in life for me, everybody was, pregnancy announcements, newborns, and I hated the way that that was making me feel because I didn't want to feel jealous or envy or anything bad about somebody else's miracle. I wanted it for myself, and it was just triggering for me, and then it would spark these just toxic feelings. So I got off social media. I didn't even think of it as a tool to find support or resources or community. I got off of it altogether and effectively created my own bubble between my wife, Chris J, and my therapist. And that was really it for me. That was all that, yeah, that those were my resources.
Yeah, I didn't realize just how big the lost community was on like Instagram and stuff like that until a year or two after I lost Jasmine. But it's one of those things that because I was similar to you, like I was still on social media, but I hid a lot of people because I don't want to see these
Yeah, yeah.
announcements. And so I wasn't like out there searching for things because I didn't know they were out there.
Yeah, it's remarkable how there is a community that exists that is not small either. It's fairly sizable. I guess it comparatively, I don't know how big the support community for something like, I don't know, like pasta would be, but I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't let me talk anymore. You're right. It's huge in relatively. There are people out there who are all get it and they're being vocal about it and they're sharing their experiences and they're being vulnerable and they're sharing the really good stuff and also the really hard and bad stuff and also the stuff that they themselves can't explain. And that's pretty powerful.
It's hard when you feel like you're the only one who's ever been through loss. I mean, like you hear that it
Right.
happens, but then you're like, okay, but now it just happened to me. So now it's real, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And stillbirth, yeah, my daughter was stillborn too. So it was one of those things that I'm like, this happens? Like this happens to people? Like
Right.
it's crazy.
It's remarkable that there are so many people and that it does happen as often as it does. I think it's one in, it used to be one in, I think it's now like 175. I think it's gone down recently marginally, but it adds up. And there are the alienation is so real. And even though I knew that I had Jay, it was like that was just like such a fluke one off. Like the fact that I know somebody, and he was the first person, as I said, he and his wife were the first family I'd ever heard of who had gone through that. I didn't even know the term stillborn or stillbirth, which now seems crazy that at, gosh, how old was I? 32, 33, that I'd never heard it before. Friends of mine were having children. I knew I'd been around in the world long enough that you think that I would have heard about it, but I never did. And that's how little that either that's how little it was talked about, or that's how little people who aren't maybe actively searching for it hear about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things like you see loss sometimes on like TV or something like that, but it's just like, oh, like it's just a miscarriage and now it's over and oh, look, now they have a baby and like it's all good now and
Which, yeah, even
like
that is like too like grazed over, is just being like, oh, yeah, all the. I think there's a website, the guys on the Sad Dads Club Discord channel we're talking about it. I think it's called like didthedogdie.com or something, or does the dog die, that
yeah.
apparently you can search for anything that might not contain a trigger warning that has some sort of like pregnancy or child loss in it,
Oh,
which I haven't been to the site clearly if I can't remember its actual domain, but
I've heard of the site, but I
yeah.
thought it was just for like the animals, which I don't like animal violence in movies, so like that was good for me, but I didn't realize
Yeah.
that you could do other things.
Oh, maybe then it probably is like a catch-all for potential triggers for people that, they before diving into a series that they've heard is so good, they want to find out if there is a like episode 3, season 2 has whatever trigger you don't want to see in it.
Yeah, I was caught off guard even on like Fear the Walking Dead. We watched that show. We watched it for like almost all the seasons. And then all of a sudden, one of them has a stillbirth.
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
goodness.
what the heck? Well, I was not prepared for this. Like, I just want to watch zombies. I don't want to watch
Right.
this. Like, so yeah, I need to check that out because yeah, I don't mind like it being portrayed, because it's good that
Right.
people talk about it, but I need to be like emotionally prepared for it.
Yeah, I even just to mention, I think that I can't remember what this documentary is called, but I listened to a lot of punk music and it was about guys in punk bands who are fathers. And I was just so surprised that the singer from the Adolescents was like, my wife and I were going through a pregnancy, and then all of a sudden there's no heartbeat, and our daughter, I think it was her daughter, was stillborn. I was like, It just when it catches you off guard, I was like, my wife and I like, she's not even particularly fond of punk music. She doesn't dislike it, but
Mhm.
she'll entertain me and like kind of tolerate it. We were just like grabbed each other's hand, was like, whoa, that was the first time we'd like heard someone else say it in some sort of like entertainment scope, or which was, yeah, just you kind of being caught off guard by it. And it's so interesting that even though, as you and I are talking, like we've been through it, so you'd think that we would be unfazed maybe by
Mhm.
it, or maybe just not that. But yeah, it's weird. I can't really find the words to kind of figure out why it is so. You just like you want to know, because when it
Yeah.
does catch you off guard, it's such like I still remember that's the only thing to this day that I've ever seen that has even even shows or movies where people are pregnant and it like follows them along the pregnancy. I'm like kind of nervous the whole time. And I'm just like bracing myself because I'm like, oh, I know the worst that can happen because I lived it. Is that where this is going? Is that the turn that this is going to take? And it just, yeah, even seeing someone pregnant in Hollywood production is nerve-wracking for me.
Yeah, it like changes your views on like pregnancy forever. It's just like now
Totally.
I'm scared about every pregnancy. It's
Yeah.
not mine.
Totally. There's no innocence there. There's like that's the first thing that comes to my mind if I see or hear about pregnancies, or I'm like anybody sharing a projected due date. I'm like, I hope so. I do. But it's we talk about this a lot also in Sad Dads Club where, the narrative goes from not when the baby comes home, but if the baby comes home. And that swapping those two words is just so powerful and so sad and so scary. It's we talk a lot. We have a channel in our Discord dedicated to pregnancy after loss just because it's a unique journey and the anxieties around it and those however many weeks, whether you're going to carry to term or you have a projected C-section date and everything that everyone's sharing and every little anxiety and scare and the number of additional hospital visits because you're like didn't feel the baby move, like not taking any chances, just the innocence and the joy, the pure joy. There is still joy. My wife and I went on to have a living child after losing Lyla, and there was a lot of hope in the pregnancy, but there was also a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, and it was exhausting. And I say that as the dad. I'm just walking around. My body isn't changing to this like unbelievable, like carrying the way women are clearly the stronger sex. I will say that. That's not up for debate. But just being alongside there for a pregnancy after loss is like, whew,
It's a
it's
lot, I'm
heavy.
sure.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
just a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of an indescribable thing. I mean, I've only been the one going through the pregnancy, never like the support person, but yeah, it was definitely really hard being the pregnant one after loss. So
I always think about just again with the birthing parent and the mother, it's like, I don't know how y'all do it. I'm so in awe and marveled by like that takes a ton of bravery where I'm like, I know that I can't even begin to understand what it's like to actually physically be pregnant and then to be pregnant, to lose a child, and then to go through pregnancy again as the one. It's like, again, I don't think I could do it. I don't know. I cannot say with any degree of certainty, again, because I've never carried a child, never will biologically, but I'm just so in awe. I mean, lost moms, and we talk about this a lot in Sad Dads Club. Like, they're just the strongest beings in the world.
I think they are too. And I always hate when people are like, oh, you're so strong. But we are.
You
We
are
are.
unbelievably so. And I know it's you're like, well, I didn't want to have to access this strength. Like, nobody should have to either, because it's not the way things are supposed to work. But just a shout out to the lost moms who are just the absolute most badass and strong and resilient. And even on days when you feel like you're not, you just are. And so big shout out to all the lost moms.
So if people wanted to find out more information or join you guys, where would they go for that?
If you go to saddadsclub.com, there is a tab on our site that says events. There's a registration form there. It just has some guidelines. You fill out your name, your email address, and then you're sent a link to join our Thursday evening sessions. And from there, again, you'll get access to our Discord channel where you learn about a lot of other things that we do. But we really only put it out there to start for now, our weekly Thursday sessions. So saddadsclub.com or on Instagram, if you go to at sad.dads.club, we do a lot of updates there. I mean, there's daily engagement there, whether it's posts or just news about whatever we have coming up that week in terms of like a reminder for our Thursday session. So Instagram and our website, those are the best places to go to find out all things Sad Dads Club.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing about your story and your organization. I think you're doing great things.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me on. Jasmine's mom, appreciate it very, very much. And just, yeah, I am in awe of you and of what you do, and you're being forthright and honest about sharing your story. And just thank you so much for inviting me on to jabberjaw a bit about Sad Dads Club and Lyla.
Thank you so much, Rob, for sharing your story and for everything that you are doing for other lost fathers. I think you're so right on so many points you made about why the fathers don't get as much attention after going through loss, especially regarding the belief that men have to be strong and stoic. I'm glad that narrative is starting to change as more fathers open up about the experience of losing their child. This helps other dads see that talking about it is not wrong or weak, and that it's actually helping so many others know that it's okay to be sad and show emotion. I think it's important to remember that just because they aren't talking about it or aren't crying about it doesn't mean that they are not hurting too. Checking in with each other is important to make sure both of your grief needs are being met. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more lost and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.